Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of NBS. It's been quite a while since our last broadcast, but the Ministry of Communication is back, we're back, and we're glad to have you make us a part of your Sunday evening, Monday morning, or whenever you happen to be listening to this. Today's show, I'll be joined by Ghost and Chipoli. Ghost, would you like to say hello?
Hello.
And, of course, Chipoli.
Hello there.
And if I'm not mistaken, Chipoli, is it your first time on NBS?
Yes, it is.
Well, awesome. Welcome to the show. It's been a while since I've been on here as well, so it's nice
Thank you very much.
nice to have everybody back, so that'll definitely make for an exciting show. So today we're going to be doing sort of a news broadcast / discussion roundtable in which we're going to go over the recently concluded election results. Obviously, May 2023 just concluded as far as the general election cycle. And so we've got some great results to announce to you guys as far as who won the races, what percentages they got, and in general, the number of votes they received. We also have some cool little factoids, but we'll get to that here in a bit. But I think first of all, we obviously want to start out with the delegates race, because the delegate is probably the most publicly visible position of any, game side elected official. So we're going to start out with the delegates race, in which, in every single race, by the way, 95 ballots were counted. That's a great turnout. We were discussing this a bit before the show, but that is a great turnout. It's not the most in history, but it is a great turnout nonetheless. So of those 95 votes, Gurundu received 83 of them, which is 94.32%. Meanwhile, obviously, his opponent, Kaschovia, received 5 votes at 5.68, with 7 abstentions. So, we can see that Gurundu almost achieved 95% of the vote. Of course, he did run in a contested election against Kasten, contested in, the sense that he had an opposing candidate who did post a campaign. Gurundu with a over 94% victory there, 83 votes out of 95. Handedly won that race as our new delegate, first-time delegate. Ghost and I can sympathize what that feeling's like to be a
first-time delegate who was already doing the job for a month, but yeah.
It's a new delegate, but we have already come to know them as our delegate for the past month or so. And I think that month was quite important as, he gained our trust. He really built a great relationship with the community in that 1 month. And I think that just really was a positive impact for the election and was definitely a factor in him winning the whole thing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, anytime that we're talking about, a delegacy transition, it always helps if you don't have to go through a transition if you're already in the seat. I mean, we've seen it before where vice delegates will later on go to become delegate. And I feel like, even if it's not expressly said, one of the major selling points of that is that you're not going to get a sort of delegacy where the person's not in the seat for, 2 months out of the term. They can take the seat within a matter of weeks. And in Gurundu's case, he was already in the seat, obviously due to Hold'em's resignation as delegate in April. So yeah, I mean, Gurundu sort of kind of had this quasi-incumbency advantage going into things, where it was really like, here's a guy who's been in the seat for the last month, who is now running for delegate to be elected as delegate, but before he was already sort of our delegate without necessarily being elected acting delegate, if you will. And of course, that also saw us gain acting delegate Sawale, or acting vice delegate, excuse me. Acting vice delegate Sawale. I mean, it could be acting delegate Sawale, All we need is one more resignation, right, guys? No, just kidding. One thing that I thought was pretty good as far as Gurundu's campaign, we are going to be going into, people's individual campaigns and just talking about generally what they ran on as far as like how they set up their election bids and stuff like that. This is a great segue here. One of the things that I really did like for Gurundu's campaign that I will admit that personally I was surprised by this. Perhaps maybe some other people weren't, but for me personally I was, and it was in a very good way. I was surprised. I found it to be very comprehensive, and I generally thought that, he addressed a lot of topics that, any delegate campaign should address, but it was definitely very in-depth, and you can tell that effort was put into it, obviously. And it was something that I feel sort of embodied a more like holistic approach. As yes, we're not going to go just ministry by ministry. Instead, just look at these two broad groups: internal affairs, external affairs, kind of thing. Um, what did you think when you were looking at Grundu's campaign at First Ghost? Because I know that as, someone who was close to Grundu as far as being an advisor and such, you probably saw or at least had discussions with Grundu as far as that like campaign materializing. If you could, what were some of the things that you guys went over for that as far as, how to really, bring a guy who hadn't been delegate before but make a campaign that's meaningful?
Well, I guess this is where I can share what surprises me about Garundu as a delegate, which is that he has a lot more ability to write this stuff on his own than most other people who actually try this stuff. I always go back to that first statement that he wrote uh, when he was first taking over in the crazy days after Boston resigned. And I didn't really have to do anything to the statement. I think I made like 2 suggestions for wording changes or something, and the entire statement was basically already done. And the campaign was kind of the same way. And you have to remember, Gruntu has run for delegate before, so a lot of this was kind of just rehashing and revising a lot of stuff that he had previously put together. Obviously, there was some new stuff that had to get added, stuff for recent events. Cards, especially, was a whole new area that had to be developed. So I'd say that stuff like that is where we probably had the most back and forth as far as feedback for the platform. So um, the general approach and the organization, the whole internal external thing, which was his big, I guess you could call it innovation, that was already in place. So it was a very easy process. The only thing, obviously, you probably noticed, it just took some time for it to get out there because it was a crazy time. Grandu wasn't able to post something right away, so we kind of had a few days where it was just kind of like, where's the platform?
Yeah, and I think there's got to be a balance there, as someone who has run for delegate before and won delegacy before, as you and I can both attest to, there's sort of a balance of, getting the platform out to be one of the first things that people see versus, getting the platform out to where it's really substantial, impactful, sort of cements your, race. Like, where are you in the, general perception of, who can do the job. Everyone always has front runners, I guess is what I should say. And if you can, balance having your campaign not be super delayed to where it looks like you're, not prepared or something, but also to where you are very detailed in what you're saying and are very comprehensive and thoughtful in your responses to things, I think that striking that balance is especially important. And I think that, Gruntu definitely delivered as far as the ability to write, a very satisfactory campaign that was comprehensive. So, Chipoli, if you had any thoughts that you'd like to add as far as what you saw from that, this is one of your first, not the first, I don't believe, but one of your first, elections in TNP where you saw a delegacy change. So if you want to go ahead and comment on that.
What really stood out to me was the revival of the Ministry of Communications. That was his huge executive change that he was going to make. And I actually quite like that decision. As you see, the ministry has worked out quite well in the past term. We have, I've been in there, so I've experienced it. We have plenty of enthusiastic staffers. We have released a Northern Star issue, and we plan to release another one on the May 31st. And I believe without Grundle, we would have never just started that effort on just reviving one of the key ministries that were just gone for the past few years, but then came back and it just made a quite good difference. And I have to give Grundle credit for starting comms up again. It was a huge task. It was a huge risk, but it seems to be working out. Our Northern Star issue was received really well. We have a lot of staffers, and the planning and had just been really well. That's what stood out to me out of his platform, the revival of the Ministry of Communications. It was a gamble, and I'd safe to say it's working out so far. So I believe I have to give the Delegate credit for kickstarting that effort. And yeah, that's what I'm most impressed by his campaign and what really stands out to me.
Yeah, and just the idea of getting us to where we are right now, which is recording this show, obviously, Collins is back, like I said. And generally just, setting things in motion that may or may not have happened anyway, but it's just taking that initiative to see that, hey, yeah, Collins is going to come back and Cash is going to be our minister and we're going to, start putting out these issues in broadcasts again. And, you know, you weren't here going back to the point where it's been a few years. You weren't here to
Oh,
experience the columns of old, but for anyone who was there, we all remember how, in BS at the time we had a lot of people who did, regularly record, host, Fijis of the world, M's of the world with the role play spotlights. We had good content coming up, Vivanco, etc. And it's great to see that we're having an opportunity to lead the revival. And I would argue that it's not really a deviation what you were, talking about from Gurundu's campaign, because that was a considerable part of it. People who wanted to see comms come back, like Cash, were probably very inclined to support Gurundu, I would suspect, because of his willingness to take that initiative and see comms come back. And this is actually a great reminder for everyone in the audience right now, in the live audience. If any of you guys have any questions that you want to ask either Ghost or Chipoli later on in this broadcast, feel free to go ahead and type them up in the meantime as we, address other topics. You can post them in the channel, and I will pose them to them live, if that's something you're interested in. It could be topics, anything ranging from how does it feel to, be a vice delegate, Chipoli, to, kind of like the question I asked Ghost about just being close to Grundy. Anything that you might be wondering about that you think that they might be able to speak on. I'm sure they'd both be happy to answer any questions that you guys might have. So yeah, we'll be doing that later on. But now let's go to the race that actually I would really like to hear some insight from someone who was in that race, which we just so happen to have on air with us. And that would be the vice delegates race. Obviously, the victor, Chipoli, sitting here with us today. Um, with 61.64% of the vote. That's 45 votes. You actually did run a campaign that was contested, not even contested in the same sense as Grundy versus Gaston, but more contested in the sense that it was back and forth, especially at the beginning of the race with people voting. Of course, you ran against Vivanco, who received the remaining 38.36% of the votes. Your 45 votes to their 27 votes. Do you have any comments as to what that was like for you as far as, the emotional aspect of it? Because I know you've told me before that you weren't necessarily sure if you were going to win, but I feel like there was a point, right, during the race where you realized that you didn't win. Yeah.
You see, I tried to ignore the fact that I was the front runner. Really, I can't deny that fact, but I can't ignore it, and I just persevered. I had that underdog mentality, the race was just a absolutely defining moment for me. It was absolutely incredible to experience. Running an election really gives you this adrenaline and energy just to keep working, prove that you should be the vice delegate instead of your opponent. I believe it was the very beginning where it was quite anxious. I think it was around tied. In the very beginning, I got the first few votes. Vivanco got the next couple of votes, and it was around equal. I ended up pulling away. You Robes and Ghost, you've experienced countless elections before, but this is quite a new moment for me because it was my first one where I was running. Coming into the election, I did not expect to win at all. I expected to play second fiddle to a more experienced candidate who would get the majority of the votes. I wanted to just put myself in the spotlight, maybe get the region to notice me, which absolutely happened. But I believe I exceeded my expectations in the election, and I'm very grateful to everyone who put their trust in me and put my name on the ballot for me, and just believed I could do the job very well. I'm just absolutely very thankful for all the support. It was very emotional for me because it's really where I just kickstarted my NS career. I just shot up the ranks. I mean, after all those months of hard work in the campaign, it just felt absolutely great. But I have now a huge responsibility in my hands, and throughout the next 4 months, my number one primary goal is to prove everyone that they should have voted for me, that I will be, well, just a good West delegate, or at the very least, a serviceable one.
Yeah.
That which is
And that's
do the job and do what my voters expect me to do, and that's my goal.
And I'd say, that's a very good goal to have. You talk about emotions, you talk about anxiety. That's a very real aspect to this. I can definitely sympathize with that. Just ask Ghost. He's had to deal with me at probably some of my worst anxiety levels as far as like elections and just the emotional roller coaster. Obviously, when you run, nobody wants to lose, but it's a lot more than that. You're putting yourself out there in front of people. And anyone who hasn't run an election, community is a big thing. There's a sense of community, especially even online. And when you put yourself in front of people, if you can get that win, it can be very validating in a sense that, hey, yes, people are around here. They see you, they notice you, they're believing in you, stuff like that. So yeah, I can definitely understand why you'd feel sort of, validated in that sense that you put yourself out there, you put in the effort to enter TART, you put in the work, this and that. And yeah, here you are, the region put their trust in you, they put their faith in you, they're behind you, because you are their vice delegate. So
make the trust worthy,
It has to be stressed. We were in very unusual circumstances with this election because the acting delegate, after a delegate resigns or leaves office, usually only sits there for a couple of weeks while we have an election for the new delegate. And Austin had resigned about, I'd say, 2 days after the cutoff for not having special elections because it was too late in the term, which is why we ended up with this weird month with Garundu as
it worked out quite well for Grundle, I must say.
Yeah, Garundu won the NS equivalent of the lottery, and I'm sure Ghost and I will kind of, talk about that maybe a bit later on. But as far as like just if you, and this is, one of the any of you guys who are like narrative, people, I know some people in the region are. If you had told somebody a year and a half ago that Garundu would be our delegate, and not only would he be our delegate, but he would come into the election with a sort of incumbency advantage from being the acting delegate. If you had taken that bet, if you were a betting man, people would not have necessarily believed you. You probably would have been liable to lose a bit of money, but here's the thing. Garundu has sort of transcended that narrative in a way that you could equate to winning the NS lottery as far as where he was a year and a half ago, a year ago, versus where he is now. So yeah, it's definitely something.
Yeah, nobody is saying Garun don't anymore.
Yeah, exactly. We can't. No, it's not Garun don't. No, surely not. And as far as like the whole, this does bring up another point. My mistake does serve me well in this sense about my vice delegate ascending to the delegacy. How are you feeling, Chipoli, as far as you're coming off a term where the vice delegate really did have to ascend to the delegacy, and here you are being vice delegate, not necessarily saying that's a real possibility, but necessarily that it is a possibility. And recent times have shown us that, it's been a reminder of that. How are you necessarily feeling as far as, being the next guy up in that sense for this term?
I certainly need time prepared to be at the top of the food chain, being a delegate. I certainly need time, but if in the event I'll have to step up to be the delegate, I'll do my best. I'll trust those who have more experience than me and who will make sure to stabilize. Who knows? Maybe you're looking at a potential run in the upcoming few months, it's September, January, maybe even next year. But it's a possibility.
Yeah, and that's kind of what you got to be as the vice delegate, just the stabilizing influence that is sort of ever present, when things hit the fan, as they did last term with the sudden resignation of Hold'em. It's not always, necessarily fair to expect the acting delegate in that case, the ascendant vice delegate, to make all these like sweeping reforms and do all this, because you have to realize that, it's unfortunate that they're even in the position to begin with due to, the circumstances surrounding it. But if they're able to, stabilize the region, just to, ensure regional security, that's what any vice delegate can really aspire to. And so long as you can, be that firm hand, it's okay. That's something that people, I feel like, gotta remember, that it's definitely okay to lean on advisors, because at the end of the day, we're all on the exact same team, which is Team TNP. In fact, I am a, returning addition to Team TNP. Uh, and it's just like that sense of community, again, going back to it, where it's like, it's okay to not necessarily be the smartest guy in the room or the most experienced guy in the room, as long as, you have people who you can count on to trust. And I think, Grundu, in this election, and especially during his acting term, I think he did have those people around him, which is good for the region. Ghost was one of those people. Mad Jack was one of those people. I'm sure he had other people who he spoke to as far as the various ministers and stuff like that. And as long as you got that team in place, then you're good to go.
Also remember that it's highly unlikely that you're going to have the same situation that Gruntu was in. Every other time this has happened, it's only a couple of weeks.
And as far as just making it your mission to say, hey, here's why the people who voted for me were right for voting for me, and here's why maybe some of you guys who didn't should have considered me. As far as you proving your worth in that sense, I think that's a perfectly reasonable and measured goal to have. So I would commend you on
proving my worth. That's gonna be the next 4 months for me. Really proving my worth. I'm not established. I got a lot to prove. Unlike you all, who have built up years of experience. I've only been here for around a year, but I'm already in such a position of trust, and I absolutely to prove. Certainly, yes, I certainly do. I certainly have to go out there and just make a splash and just prove that I can be even better than this.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that, and as far as this election, this race in particular had the most people of any of the three races to abstain. That's 23 abstentions for those who are counting at home. And, maybe next time around, if you run for re-election, or maybe in the future, where with you in elected office, maybe we'll see less abstentions if you to prove your worth.
I believe a lot of people were not familiar with my game, which I'm completely okay with. I can totally understand. A lot of people who didn't know me, they weren't sure about me, and that led them to not vote for me, maybe. But that's my job: be known, be recognized, be trusted.
Yeah, and let's shift the discussion a bit to your opponent here. We talked about how it was like for you, but if either of you guys want to comment, what did you guys see from Vivanco's campaign that you think really made them a good running opposition to Chipoli? Is there anything in particular that you guys want to comment on of why you think Vivanco was a good opponent for Chipoli? Maybe why Chipoli, might have ended up winning, etc. Any thoughts on that?
Well, it kind of feels like you asked me a couple of questions there, because my initial response by the end of your question was, I think the biggest factor was the preparation. I think Chipoli was just better prepared, had a much more comprehensive platform, covered a lot more ground. There was just a lot of stuff, a lot of specifics there to kind of drill into, and I think that Vivanco's campaign didn't do the best job of showcasing what Vivanco could do in all of those categories. I think that the Q&A portion was the strongest part of Vivanco's platform. Once you can get more information and get some questions answered, and those answers kind of elaborate on a lot of that stuff, I feel like the platform that didn't exist, so to speak, kind of took shape in those answers, and that was where Vivanco's campaign, I think, was strongest, was once you started to get more specifics and those scenarios taken care of. But I think that the initial preparation, and if you're at a point in a race where you have to kind of build on your stuff and kind of explain it better, I think that's a weaker position to work with than if you already kind of have everything laid out and you're just clarifying things. It's just kind of a stronger start. And sometimes that makes a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, I'd certainly say so. Again, going back to that balance we discussed for the delegacy race, the same could apply to any contested election, and even those who are not contested, you still want to get your message out there. You still want to be, clear and easily understandable to the voters, and you definitely want to make it seem like, you have your ducks in a row, your stuff together, so to speak. You definitely want to seem like you're prepared. And I would say, yeah, Chipoli did a good job of that. And I know that, I know from someone who was competing with him in the endorsement rankings that he was a good endotarder, which is something I'll fully admit I was not the best at when I first became vice delegate back in 2020. It just wasn't something that I was nearly as developed at where compared to where he is. And I think that definitely served him well as far as we've seen these transition updates, and the transition's already well underway for the vice delegacy. Two SCers have been passed up already, so I think that level of preparation was definitely attractive.
Passed the vice delegate minimum endorsement count for around 2 months, so I think it was quite, had a high endorsement count, which already built up prior to the election. Which
Yeah, it's fair to say that SC knew Chipoli's name already.
I was about to say, you saying you were above the vice delegate, that's a weird way to say that you were on the SC's radar before you became their chair. But yeah, no, I mean, we have people in TNP who exchange a lot of endorsements, but not every single one of them, I feel like, has the drive to do it like you do. Like, you had a specific purpose that you set out for, like, hey, I'm going to try this, and you put yourself in the position to do it. So there you go.
we were talking about multiple term delegates earlier, but I've noticed something, a comment made by Comrade Dali in the chat. He posted being a multiple term delegate doesn't make one trustworthy. I just like to know your thoughts on that. Do you agree or do you disagree with that?
Dali is a very special case. And I mean special case in the best way, in the sense that I don't know, I don't think that you could get away with this nowadays. Not saying that you should get away with this nowadays, but compared to where TNP was, maybe a decade plus ago versus where it is now, it's just sort of a testament to how stable things have been. But for those who, might need a history lesson, Dolly obviously has a history with, being quote unquote a tyrant. I'm Robespierre. I'm a tyrant too, but he is like the tyrant OG. And it's one of those rare cases where technically a delegate can go rogue and then also get reelected in the future. So in TNP, you had early days of TNP, you had a lot of those, where not a lot of those, but like it was definitely more fathomable than it would be now. So yeah, necessarily terms don't equal trust, but terms can definitely be a good indicator of where you stand as far as your credibility and your political soft power, etc.
I mean, yeah, elected a bunch of times. You obviously had enough trust from the voters to be elected, but it's obviously a true statement. Just because you got elected a bunch of times doesn't that alone does not mean you are a trustworthy person. You can always coup at any time, no matter how many times you've been delegate before.
Yeah, I mean, if MCM hypothetically one day woke up and said, "Listen, I'm a 6, 7 term delegate now. Let's do something different for a change," and then he just started dismissing regional officers or something, it's an outlandish thought, but it's not necessarily, oh, MCM's been a 6, 7, plus term delegate. He's always going to be trustworthy. Like, I mean, things change. The pieces on the board move, things like that.
You can't rule it out.
Exactly. I mean, I don't think we should really exist in fear of that for what it's worth, but I mean, it is a possibility, I suppose. So yeah, what you're saying here, or what Dolly's saying rather, is a true statement.
I believe we use that as an indicator rather than a guaranteed measure of the trustworthiness as a person. I mean, it correlates sometimes, but it can never be it can never guarantee if you are trustworthy. And I was seeing under a question in the chat. Chipoli, any special tips for endotarters I have just one thing I want you to do: open up the endorsement tool, endorse people, and then you see on your nation state's profile, go to national happenings, go to the World Assembly, click on members, click on region, and you'll see everyone who has joined the World Assembly in the last 3 days or something, and you just annotate them. You know, annotate consistently, annotate daily. I annotate 3 times a day, and have been doing it for a few months, and it's got me pretty far. So I suggest you do the same.
And as I learned, especially, you do have to be proactive, like Chipoli's talking about, doing it consistently and stuff like that. But you also better be sending those telegrams out because
Absolutely. Telegrams
yeah.
give you an extra 10, 20, 30. You know, your endorsement count stagnates. And once you start telegramming, it just exponentially just grows. It goes to the roof. It just reaches whole other levels.
That's something that people might not realize, but in TNP, where you think, endorsements are a dime a dozen, there is a proverbial wall, if you will, at around, I would say it's around 600, 700 area, where it does kind of stall a little bit, and you do kind of have to work harder for those endorsements. But yeah, sending telegrams, doing it consistently, all that good stuff that Ghost has been doing for a super long time as an SCer, all that stuff does pay off eventually if you're able to do it.
I have another tip on top of that one.
Go ahead.
The telegram that you send out has to be an individual telegram. You cannot do a mass telegram that's very clear that it's going to lots of people. People respond differently when it looks like you're talking to them one-on-one. And I don't even necessarily know how they can tell the difference sometimes, or
make it
why that makes a difference, but thing is, you don't even have to make the content personal. They just have to not see that it's obviously been sent to lots of people, and that just seems to unlock an extra few endorsements. So just it's a little more work, obviously, but it's obviously worth doing because you're going to improve your results.
Yeah.
And one more thing I want to point out: there's a certain point where you sort of have to go down. There's a little thing called the vice delegate minimum count, and when the Security Council detects someone is above the delegate vice delegate, minimum count, they have to alert them to make sure that, hey, we know we've been NRTD for last few period of time, and we like to stop. So if you see you're getting close to the levels of the security counselors, I think it's a time to just chill out. You're probably pretty high anyway, so whatever your motivations are, you have to stop.
This is a friendly PSA from your newly elected vice delegate to Cloud and I and a few others.
I cannot have the Security Council. I cannot have this me talking about getting high endorsement counts and not talking about going to hard.
You got to do it safely.
Security Council will be too happy with me on that.
Yeah, don't do it recklessly, and you'll be okay. But those are all good advice. Moving along now to just regional trust, and this is something that I'm going to kind of take a back seat on because, as some of you guys will know, I was away for a while, so I wasn't really around to witness sort of the rise of Skaraborg. But moving on to the speaker's race, Skaraborg received 81.58% of the votes. That is 62 votes out of 95. And of course, they were running against Oceania. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Who received 18.42% of the votes, otherwise known as 14 votes. So as far as getting, Skaraborg gaining the trust of the region to once again be elected as speaker, where do you guys think that started, and what do you guys think contributed to that?
Well, I think that the campaign questions made the difference here because the Q&A kind of revealed that Ocean needed to review the book a few more times before taking the test, metaphorically speaking. So I think the election basically was decided once that happened. And experience, obviously, and being the incumbent, it's already going to be a leg up. But when your opponent doesn't even have the basics down when taking the questions, that they're kind of basically losing the election right there.
That doomed them, they just didn't study enough. They gave them a shot, but incorrect answers are really quite the deal breaker for the election.
Kind of going back to that whole, it's not really a competition between TNPers as much as it is who can we get to do the best job when they're able to do it, like available to do it, etc. And I think, I would affirm as someone who did vote for Skarborg, I would affirm that Skarborg was the more seasoned person to, be in that role, the more seasoned option. And I'm glad to see Ocean coming onto the team again as a fellow deputy speaker, to hopefully, get more of that experience and maybe, learn more so that in the future they are able to make that run in convincing fashion. And that's really what it's all about, just the development of talent that we have here in TNP. And making sure that, yeah, someone's going to, obviously there were people before Skarborg, just like there's going to be people after Skarborg. And hey, maybe one of those people will be the person he faced in the election.
Yes, Scarborough, just had that extra flavor, that extra appealing bit, with just the experience and the knowledge.
Yeah, Skarborg was pretty enthused. Though I will say I'm Cash's deputy, but I did not approach Cash. But I did approach Skarborg, and I'm fine in saying that. But Skarborg seemed pretty enthusiastic. Like, hey, here's a former speaker, and he seemed pretty enthusiastic to have me, which is kind of reassuring in a sense for me because I didn't know what the general attitude would be from people who obviously were in office. But yeah, I'm happy to be a part of the team, contribute all that stuff. I really did enjoy Speaker's office back when I did it prior to my delegacy. So yeah, it was obviously one of the areas that, even though I'd done it before, I'd done it twice before. Um, actually thrice if you consider my term as speaker to be doing it, which obviously. It was something that, I enjoyed and was interested in. It really helps, make sure that the gears of the region turn, which is, I think, what people are really looking for of any speaker candidate. It's very bureaucratic. It can be thankless at times, absolutely. But it's really just making sure that our democracy works. You can't have a democracy if the legislature is stalled and nothing ever gets discussed or voted upon. And you can't have a democracy if no citizens are being admitted to, have those suffrage rights to be able to vote and discuss things. So the speaker plays a vital role in both of those areas. So if you're able to do that and you're able to make the gears turn, then hey, you're good enough for us.
Obviously, the speaker also needs their deputies because sometimes the speaker can't be everywhere all at once. And we have seen the gears do stop turning sometimes if those deputies aren't being utilized properly. So
Yep.
that was my one critique of Skarborg's time as speakers. The deputies could have been utilized more, and they needed to know that it was okay for them to take stuff up.
And you see, when you have such an important job as speaker, you sort of do need to think about that. You have a sense of responsibility when you are elected as speaker, and if you know you can't be there, then let your deputy team know, and they'll take care of it for you. It keeps the gears turning, as you said earlier.
Yeah, and if I might be so inclined as to speak on this, I really think that there's a healthy dynamic in the speaker's office right now with the deputies that Skarborg has appointed. Obviously, I'm not to the level of Ghost as far as like wise elder statesmen, but you do have people in the speaker's office like Bob, Sill, myself, who either have been deputies or have been speakers ourselves, ran for speaker, etc. So, maybe coach up some of the newer people like Oceana, Nutmeg. There's another name that eludes me. Not Cloud. Cloud's been doing great. Caius, perhaps.
Kais has been active speaker before, so I think.
Okay, yeah. So just some of those newer, maybe the Oceanas of the world, maybe the Nutmegs of the world, just making sure that, hey, people realize they're a deputy speaker, you've got vested authority, here's what our priorities are. Personally, I've talked about just longevity, just about how pacing yourself and asking for help is important, because realistically, if the speaker's office is at its best 1.5 months out of the term, that doesn't help anyone. Like, you need to be consistent with it for all 4 months. That's what people need. You can't fall short of that. You have to play till the end, play till the whistle, so to speak. So it's important to do that.
You gotta be consistent throughout the entire term, and I learned that the hard way. during the September-January term.
Was that as Ghost's Minister of World Assembly Affairs?
Yes.
Oh yeah, you're actually back as Minister of World Assembly Affairs, so there
Yes,
you go. Yeah, in the speaker's race, 19 people abstained, and I'm sure a lot of that was just voter preference, personal reasons, etc. Maybe some reopen nominations votes there. But for the most part, yeah, 81%, nothing to scoff at against anyone. So I would say that it's also cool that Skarborg, not cool necessarily, but it works out that he's in the European time zone, I believe. And obviously you have some Americans, you have some Europeans in the speaker's office, you have Cloud over in the Philippines, etc. We've got good coverage as far as our deputies to make sure that round the clock someone is around that, if anything needs done, they'll either be around to do it, or at least at the very least you could message someone. Right before we reach our next segment, which is discussing the cabinet appointments, we're going to be doing that a bit more briefly than we did recapping each election. But some interesting factoids from this election, again, brought to you by the Professor Ghost. And no, I'm not being sarcastic. He actually told me this before the show began.
He has his own spreadsheet.
Yeah, he keeps his records, which is actually super handy for the rest of us. But going back to the whole Grunzu won the TNT lottery thing, this is an interesting stat for those of you guys who are like stat nerds. Grunzu enjoyed the third highest percentage as far as votes received for delegate candidates who ran in contested elections. And by contested elections, I mean someone ran against them on the ticket, not necessarily that they were what we would refer to as a competitive candidate, but contested elections nonetheless. He received the third highest vote percentage. That is behind Flemingovia and the bird who shall not be named. Kasten got 5 votes, whereas past candidates have gotten, less than 3. So technically, yeah, that does make Grundu at 94.32%, the third most, votes received delegate as far as percentage share of their election, which I thought was pretty cool. And also the turnout, it was not the most all time. The most all time is still May 2020, pandemic era, obviously. But it's still 95, which 95 is a very healthy democracy, especially for TNP, which
it's in the top 10.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good election. So for Grundy to have that stat in an election that had very high turnout, that is, even the number of abstentions was very low. Like I said, 7 abstentions, of which, having above almost or at almost a 95%. That's a really cool little nugget of information for those of you guys who might have wanted to know it. And I thought it was interesting because it just goes to show, again, who could have expected this, right? It's been 8 years since we had an acting delegate, but who could have seen it coming?
Certainly not Garundu.
Garundu, the least of all, saw it coming, probably. And here he is, yeah. So, which actually brings us to a next excellent sort of transition here, which is Garundu's cabinet. Going back to the, opening, the timing of campaigns and stuff, the opening address is another thing that, sort of needs to get out there so that people know, hey, what's going on in the region. And we did get that. We got, we got 7 ministers here. We're going to go through them one by one, but I am going to ask both Ghost and you, Chipoli, about, you're closer to the executive than I am. Just some general thoughts that we got going here. So, like I mentioned a bit ago, you're our new Minister of WA Affairs. Our Minister of Communications, of course, is Cash, the lovely editor-in-chief of this broadcast. Our Minister of Home Affairs, who was joining us earlier, he might be gone now, but that is Comfad, Home Affairs. Defense Minister Rom, of course, a stalwart. He's been there for almost rivaling Gladio levels now of just being the constant presence of defense. In a good way. Culture, Dredton. Dredton makes a return as a minister. Foreign Affairs is Fregerson, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And, of course, returning Minister of Cards, Noah's second country. So, yeah, we've got a full lineup of ministers here. They've all assigned deputies. Starting from the top with Minister of WA Affairs, as far as how it is on the government page, we're going to start from the top. How are you feeling, Chipoli? How's it to be in a role that you used to be in under Ghost, but hopefully in a revitalized spirit, you're under that role now?
Yep, this time I'm certainly looking to make a bigger difference than I did last time. I created a new staff training program, a new mentor program. I look to, revitalize the World Assembly Accelerator program. So I certainly look to do a lot more than I did last time.
I'm sure Ghost can appreciate that. You being back under that, let's get at it.
I appreciate that people live up to their potential, and if they weren't quite doing it last time they were there, that they can pick it up and do it right when they get another chance. So yeah, I'm happy to see that. We always joked that after he left, in that next term, he was everywhere doing all sorts of stuff, and it was like, where was this when you were in charge of the ministry? So hopefully we can see those two things aligned now.
And
I'm certainly hoping to do a lot this term and absolutely be much better. Last time I was cautious, too scared, not wanting to take risks, but this time I've changed my attitude. I'm taking risks. I'm gonna make huge changes. I have still a lot more to do following this podcast, but yeah, I'm going to this new term with a different attitude, a different mindset, and more ambition.
now you're holding dual roles. You gotta represent now. See, you gotta show out. Let them know.
Absolutely, I gotta do my very best. I cannot.
It's a good attitude to have. No, you seem to got the right attitude going forward.
I cannot do the bare minimum. You know what? I can't just be good. I have to be great, and I'm gonna do my very best to manage my responsibilities, make sure I don't take up too much, to avoid burnout, focus on my roles, and don't not neglect them. Just do a good job.
Yeah, and like I talked about earlier, you got plenty of people you can lean on now, to avoid things like burnout. You got your deputies. I'm sure you've got a friendly predecessor over there in Freg, who is now an FA, as I mentioned. You've obviously got the Delegate Grundy, who he himself has been a Minister of World Assembly Affairs. You've got Ghost, who's dealt with that area, obviously, both as delegate and as a minister. So you've got plenty of people who, you can reach out to. I was senior WA consultant myself at one point, deputy minister 3 times over. You got a lot of people in TNP especially who care about the WA, who have a vested interest in it, and are not going to be shy necessarily about making sure that that part of the region's agenda is a success. Shifting over here to, communications, we talked a bit. Cash being our executive producer, I know we spoke about how comms coming back was a huge thing at Garantu's campaign, and I would say that so far, from what I've observed from Cash, and I knew going into it when Cash asked me to be a deputy, I knew that I worked well with Cash. I knew that. But I also knew that Cash is a person who actively wanted communications to come back and really cared about making sure that it was a success when it did come back. Obviously, it's too early to tell, if that's going to be the case. But from what I have seen, I will tell you that he's very prepared. He definitely has his ducks in a row. The level of just like foresight and preparation is everything that you would expect from a minister, from what I can tell. And I think that we're definitely set for success. I mean, this is the first NBS broadcast of the term, but it's definitely not going to be the last. We've got TNS coming out. We've got TNL plans in the working, in the works. And comms is back, and I think people are enthusiastic about that. And as Fiji, a past minister of comms, has taught us, you gotta have that passion, to make comms what it is. You gotta have that drive, and I know he himself is very happy to see comms back. So yeah, Home Affairs Minister ComFed. So ComFed is, I'm going to take another backseat on this one. Maybe Ghost can speak about it, especially. What have we seen from ComFed as a staffer, like prior to becoming Minister of Home Affairs? Because I imagine there's a lot more than what I'm familiar with, especially considering where they are at now. But where do you think ComFed really makes a good case as a Minister of Home Affairs?
I think we have a very good tradition of bringing up very prolific, hardworking deputies that are standing out, and we do like to give the new talent a chance to rise. So Comp is just part of that tradition, and HA is something that it's a machine that's a fairly predictable machine, and the only thing that really changes term to term is the different tricks that people try to employ with it and try to innovate. And sometimes you need the new people to come in to do that. And sometimes the staffers that are doing the best work are showing that they know how to do it better than everyone else. You want to see, like, if I gave you more freedom to kind of change the direction of how it's done, maybe we'd get better results. So there's a lot of experimentation that comes with bringing in new people and new ideas, and HA just kind of lends itself, I think, to experimentation in a way that the other ministries don't really have that same opportunity. So ComFed making a case for himself. He's been deputy and a staffer for a long time in a lot of areas. You could have slotted him in a few different places and given him a try. I just think it's a time thing. It's like it's time. It's ComFed's time, I guess. So this is the test. I can't really say this early out what case ComFed's made for himself. I think that will come with time, obviously. But this is something that we see fairly often. I think HA is kind of like unofficially the place that you put the new people that you want to give them a try and see what they can do. It usually is HA.
HA was my first job, so yeah, it definitely is a tradition, like you're mentioning. Another question that I kind of want to ask you guys, and just put out there some food for thought, is in a post, FNS landscape, frontiers and strongholds, how important do you guys think it is now that TNP can't really just coast by on its status as a feeder? It's really gotta, we gotta hone in on that to recruitment. I know Garundu talked about it in this campaign, but that definitely is an element where it's not just like, HA can't, for lack of a better word, be lackluster. Like, it's gotta be something, because do you guys think that's definitely gonna play into how, maybe ComFed's term is measured because it's post FNS? Or how do you think that necessarily plays into things?
Yeah, I think he will have a huge responsibility. He's going to be in charge of recruitment, something we haven't really had to worry about since a nation just spawned in our region at a quite a greater rate. But now we have frontiers taken away, our spawns, and the whole affairs ministry will have to work on getting that recruitment and making TMP be, attractive, being appealing.
Yeah, and every delegate comes along and says, we're going to do this instead of that, the experimentation aspect of it. But I think that never more so than now has it been like, have, some sort of ramification attached to it, where it's like, it's not just, if it doesn't work necessarily, like, oh, okay, and then predictable HA term. It's more like, if it doesn't work, we need to find something else that does work quick, because recruitment is gonna play a bigger part as to, our regional population and stuff like that. Like, it's definitely something that's more of a necessity now, in a way, whereas before it was kind of, not necessarily by intention, but in practice, complementary. So I think now it's definitely more vital to getting things, in motion where we get more of these talented individuals coming to TNP.
I see a question in chat regarding the Frontier and Stronghold update from Dali. He said that he has a question for the panel. Has there been a noticeable difference in gaining endorsements since Frontier started, and do you find it harder to gain since the change?
I don't know about harder to gain. In fact, was it last week? Ghost can remind me if it was last week. But I kind of did an oopsie that I wasn't necessarily sure if it was an oopsie. Some could argue that I should have known better, but I forgot that since the transition had started, the vice delegate minimum was going to go lower because Chipoli had a lower endorsement count than Sawale, obviously. And I didn't even send out any telegrams. I just started, I caught up on all my endorsements, my endorsement backlog, because I hadn't edited it for like over a month at that point. And I got more in like return endorsements than I would have thought. Like, I sort of underestimated how many people would actually end up endorsing me. But when FNS first dropped, I did notice a decline, like a drop off, and that could be ceasing to exist. But I think across the board, I think Chipoli felt it too. It was maybe like 30 to 40 endorsements ish, where it was kind of a drop off. And you'd have to look at the SCR's numbers, But I think something about the WAs, I think across the board, people had a slight drop off, and then, we have these graphs in the Vice Delegates report that kind of show how that trend's been going. So maybe Chipoli would be the best equipped to answer that question. But personally, I think that it's not any more difficult to gain endorsements. It's just there was a bit of a drop off.
So I've been collecting data for the Vice Delegate report, and a part of my report has been endorsements, and I can say our WA population is steadily decreasing, and I have a very good reason to believe it's because of the Frontier Stronghold update. Savali was at like 970 or 80 at the start of the term. He's at 960 now. So the security councilors are losing endorsements. But as far as I can tell, if you're not endorsing very frequently, your endorsement count will drop. But if you're endorsing, you should be able to get a couple of endorsements a day. I don't know if I don't think you have the same luck as you did in the past. Then again, due to the decline in WA nations, but I think it's still very effective to endorse, and you can very easily just gain a lot of endorsements as easily as you can in the past.
Yeah, I mean, a week ago or so, I was at 750, like high 750s, and now I'm at like mid 730s, I believe. So I know the Vice Delegates report came out today. I think I looked at it. I know that personally.
Yes.
I know that personally. I've slipped a bit, and I think everyone, in some sense, has, unless you're actively endotarting. So yeah, there's a bit of natural decay there. There's a bit of drop offs as far as people ceasing to exist, people moving out to other regions, etc. And that thing, it's always going to happen in a feeder. People are going to come and go. But I
But
think
you guys have to appreciate also that we were already seeing a decline in WA nations before Frontiers dropped. As far as how it's been, as somebody who has been observing the endotarting for all the months of this year, it really isn't any different. We were having trouble getting daily new people to endorse, which is kind of like the trick is you want to get them as soon as they get into WA. You want to snag their WA before they stop logging in so that you have like a passive collection that you have for like 30 days. And that number was already small. And with Frontiers, basically, if there was any rebound that was going to occur, Frontiers has completely eliminated that as a possibility. So we have kind of like a wave pattern before where we'd have dips and then they would kind of climb back up. And I'm saying that that climb back up that we used to see isn't going to happen anymore because of Frontiers. So the dips are just going to be lower and lower. So sadly, if it weren't for Frontiers, we might have seen an increase in our WA numbers at this point, and I guess now obviously we won't. So as far as what it feels like for our process, it doesn't feel any different to me and probably to the other SCers that it already was, because we were already on the way down. So it's just it's keeping that trend going in the wrong direction. So like our whole numbers eventually are going to be lower on average, but it's not happening very, very quickly. It's happening trending down. It's a gradual thing. It's kind of gentle. We're gently losing endorsements.
Yeah.
Eventually, it will stagnate,
You don't.
and we will never reach the same levels as we did before. But as a feeder and a very large fusion, we will still maintain very good endorsement count. We could stay in the thousands for our delegate at the very least, which is still very powerful.
You don't really feel it near as much so long as you're not like hemorrhaging endorsements and influence, etc. Which is why I think Ghost is talking about how to the SCers, and he has that unique perspective out of the three of us from being an actual SCR. I know you're a chair of the SC, but you're a non-SCR vice delegate. Kind of like I was, but just how it doesn't necessarily feel as different to them because they've been around for months to years at this point. And yeah, of course, in any feeder, it's gonna dip, it's gonna dive, it's gonna do all these different things, but we might not necessarily have that bounce back. It remains to be seen, but I can totally understand why, due to the Frontiers and Strongholds update, it might not necessarily bounce back. So yeah.
Yeah, the security councilors don't do it as much as the regular WA members might, because there are incentives for endorsing security council members, and I've observed that they're still getting quite a lot of endorsements coming their way even when they're inactive and not on the tour scene. So it's not as bad for the Security Council, but if you're a regular individual, you might feel it a little bit more.
Yeah, and sort of refocusing to the cabinet here. Next up, we've got Minister of Defense Rom. What is there really to say about Rom? I mean, Rom is Rom, capable, experienced NPAer, updater, R&D'er, defender, whatever you really need him to be as far as gameplay is involved. He can be, as far as, in my opinion. You know, if it wasn't for Rom, I guess this is an interesting question. If it wasn't for Rom, who do you think would be the other option? Because Rom is kind of, at first, in the past, it seemed like he was kind of like a stopgap measure, but now he's like the go-to. You know, it's like, can you do it again? Yes. Okay. Can you do it again? Yes. Okay. And it's just like, you get quality terms out of this guy. It's not like he's coasting by. You get quality terms out of him, but he really is kind of taken a mantle akin to Gladio at this point. He's like the modern day Gladio, as I call him, where it's just a constant presence in the NPA. So if it wasn't for Rom, who do you think would be Minister of Defense? And, you know, is there a person, or is it more just like we really need to refocus on the NPA? What do we got there?
Me personally, I'd have to say it will probably be one of the deputies. I think Barbarino would be a pretty good option. He's an experienced NPA, or he served as Minister of Defense for a few terms. He hasn't been in that position in a while, but I'd say if I was a delegate, I'd trust him to be there instead of Rom.
What was that, Ghost?
That I wonder why.
I've been MOD more recently than Bob has, and I was last MOD in late 2019 under MCM. So, it's been a bit. Another name that I know was maybe floated around as speculation was LD, Lord Dominator, aka Lady Ravenwing. In hindsight, that might have not been the greatest because they ended up vacating office. So they would have ended up vacating 2 offices had that been the case. But, you know, I know that another person, Fiji, has come back to the NPA. He even said the other day, I'm sure he wouldn't mind me sharing this, he even said the other day that he's been offered both deputy and the position of MOD before. And he turned it down, obviously, because of like his real life situation and schedule. But, you know, there are some names in the NPA that it's not just Rom, but Rom is clearly running the show. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, because so long as you can get good terms out of him, which you can, he's very reliable and consistent, then, you know, I'd say it's a solid pick by Garandu to just have. Garandu himself comes from an NPA background, so.
I mean, I get it, because when I was delegate, we were struggling to figure out who was going to be MOD, and you know, the funny thing is that ended up happening to me again in my most recent terms. But yeah, back then it was Gladio that was the, can we get him to stay on? Will he keep doing it? And then that was always the question. And initially he told me he wouldn't. And so I had to go find other people. I had to find 2 different people before he finally came back and was like, okay, I'll do it. And then everything was good after that.
Is that how you found Dark and Bob?
You're thinking of actually Sastin and Dark.
Sastin and Dark. Okay, not Dark and Bob, because Bob came after Dark. Okay.
Oh, I did appoint Dark twice. In my 3rd term, Dark was actually my starting MOD.
Yeah. Actually, Dark was here earlier today. Yeah, Dark's another name who's returned. I don't think he's involved with the NPA nowadays, but he has returned, and he's done like tech guild stuff. So it's cool to see all these names returning, you know?
Yep, we're getting a lot of old-timers back here. Cash is one of them.
Yeah.
He had a dormant period for a few months.
He's had a few dormant periods.
Yep, he has, but hopefully this it'll be a while before his next one this time.
Did you know that Cash is a former vice delegate?
Actually, yes, I did. I've seen a few of his posts in the Security Council channel.
Yeah, granted, it was a much younger Cash, but
he was also a former SCer.
Yeah.
Yep, I've looked at all the threads. So, I know.
You got another former vice delegate around in the cabinet there with you.
It's been quite a while.
You said old timers, and I don't know if we can call him an old timer yet, but there is Dreadton. Dreadton has reached the old timer rank of benevolent admin. A lot of the old timers are also benevolent admins, but he's had an up culture this term, a return to the cabinet, and It's been a while for him. It was actually probably the most surprising pick to me, not because of who he was, but because I was under the impression he was taking a bit of a break due to like real life reasons and availability things and whatnot. But I guess that doesn't happen to be the case. Maybe plans change and stuff like that. But yeah, Dredton is back in culture. I believe. I know he's been Minister of Radio before. Has he been Minister of Culture, Ghost? You're the record keeping.
I believe he has.
He
Okay.
has been Minister of Culture.
Okay. So he's
Right
back.
before I joined.
All right. So he's back in the role. So,
And one thing I want to say, I really did not expect Feely to leave office. I'm not sure why he left office, but I think he was doing quite a formidable job there. And I was quite surprised when I heard the news that he was being replaced, which is very interesting. I've seen him as one of the more promising players, but looks like for this term, he's going to take a back seat.
It's funny you mentioned that because when the opening address came out, I had an idea of who was going to be where. I mean, as everyone does, you kind of hear things here and there. You kind of get your own thoughts injected into it. But my first thought when I read over the lineup, and I was like, where's Feely? That was actually one of my first thoughts. And we kind of got that answer later on because Grundu did appoint Feely to continue, or reappoint rather, to continue serving as the lead game side advocate. And Dredton just earlier today kind of refocused and redefined what the game side advocates are. So we have Feely as LGA now, but
He's been LGA for a bit.
right. He's been LGA, but as far as being a minister, no, kind of taking a step back as far as being a minister. And we have Dredton now. Our return to Dredton.
And let's see, Ferguson was my predecessor as Minister of War Assembly Affairs, but he has shifted. He has shuffled. He's been shuffled around in the cabinet. He hasn't been removed or added. He's been changed, and now he's the Foreign Affairs Minister, which would be quite an important role in the wake of the TNP TSP drama.
It's like the pipeline of WA to FA, because that's like the third time that WA.
Ranger did that too. Over.
No, that was T-Loms.
Oh yeah, it was T-Loms.
When Grundu became Minister of World Assembly Affairs, was because T-Loms moved over to FA, and Boston also did that.
Yeah, so I don't know. Hey, maybe in the future, Minister of Foreign Affairs Chipoli, right? Coach you up a bit, get you in Foreign Affairs portfolio. I don't know.
I would take that.
Yeah, it's interesting because Ferguson he's kind of inherited these rising tensions with TNP, TSP. We're probably not going to get into that whole can of worms on this show. If you guys want a show like that, I'm sure we could get some people who want to be on here and talk about it. But as far as, Minister of Foreign Affairs, on continuing proactive action towards foreign policy goals, he's basically saying, challenges are coming. You got to be careful to maintain respectful communication. I mean, you could probably see some of that with the TSPA drama. Just generally, you got to heal the lingering differences, he said. TNP, TSP especially, you see it in that situation. They have differences. He talks about healing those, serious commitment, and careful steps that you're willing to try. He talks about, rethinking, record keeping, information access, making sure that people know about foreign affairs, just foreign affairs education. And he also talks about, this is a foreign affairs issue, protecting the sovereignty of our WA vote. That's something that's definitely important in recent.
It's also a WA issue as well.
Absolutely.
It ties in with both of them.
Yeah, a lot of these ministries are interconnected. That's another thing to note. But yeah, it's just generally, I think, kind of taking things back to the way they should be, which is maybe, I don't know if we want to go so far as to say we're a bit astray from that now, but as far as just like refocusing it and being like, yeah, here we go.
Well, what I was originally going to say was that the idea that we are refocusing and trying to pay a little more attention to improving communication with other regions and such, I believe that's a strength that Ferguson offers. Restructuring, reorganizing how everything's done internally, Ferguson would be an excellent choice for the internal side. There's always kind of the two halves of FA. There's obviously all of our organization and how we manage it on our side of things. And then there's the going to meetings with all of the big regions and having the big important discussions. So I feel like just his basic skill set, Frigerson, is well poised for the first type of thing. And the second type of thing is really, you kind of have to learn it by doing it. So most FA ministers kind of just have to have that trial by fire experience. So I feel like for Frigerson, there's going to be a lot to learn in that side of things. But even in that side of things, I think Frigerson has a very good public face, just generally speaking, mingling with other players and just being really friendly and fun. And every other time that he's had a chance to do that, he's been really good at it. So that's going to serve him well in that capacity. But as far as like the big serious, I'll tell you this though. I'll give you a little bit of insight from seeing Frigerson at work so far. He can speak the diplomatic language. He can communicate that way. Perhaps more than I've never had any reason to see if he could. It's never really come up, but it is a skill that is not completely foreign to him. So I don't think he's going to be as strange in that side of the role as some people might think. But that's kind of my thoughts on it.
As someone who has worked with him, he was my deputy for a brief period of time, and this past term I was his deputy in the World Affairs Ministry. I think he's a very capable and talented player. He is very good at man management. He knows what he's doing. As Ghost really said most of it for me, but he knows how to speak diplomatically. He's a good diplomat. He can work things out. I have utmost faith in him that he'll succeed in his new role, and I wish him the best of luck if he is listening to this by any chance.
Yeah, and something I wanted to speak on right before we move on to the last minister appointment is just the whole speaking the diplomatic language thing. Obviously, the communication is important, but also the tone is important. Anybody who's been involved with FA of any capacity or even PR in real life will tell you that's very important, like the tone and the approach you have to things. An observation that I've made from Ferguson is that by no means is he like the loudest person in the room, and that's totally fine for a foreign affairs role, because you don't necessarily need like this loud and boisterous individual to like conduct all your business. He's definitely, in my observation, he's more of the quieter but more well-spoken type, to the point where it's like he's definitely less outspoken than I am, like personally. And so it's almost like if he is going to say something, he's going to think about it for a bit, which is good, because when you're engaging other regions, you're going to want to think about what you're saying to them before you say it. And it's also just that to some, and I don't know if this is the case, but to some who might have seen him work, maybe, when Ferguson speaks, you'll listen up a bit, because he's not going to say it all the time, So I think he's good in that sense. And I wish him the best of luck, because this whole thing with TSP is going to be interesting.
It's going to be quite the head scratcher, especially for a new foreign affairs minister who's first time in the role, and then right off the bat, we have quite a lot of trauma with whatever long-standing allies over whether or not we should keep our treaty or not.
There's a lot of history there. There's a lot of tradition in a way. All right, final ministerial appointment. We talked about the LGA. We talked about all the other ministers. Let's talk about Minister of Cards Noah. So Minister of Cards, a lot of our tech doesn't work anymore, unfortunately. That's something that the Tech Guild is working to address, that Grundu has talked about, making sure that our tech is, up to our expectation again. But it has put a hindrance on cards, and it's put a hindrance on cards for a long time. Just either the tech not working or not having our RAN around, or R3N, however you want to say it.
And the card lottery has not been working either.
Exactly. So, Grundu spoke about that. There definitely is a focus on that. I know the Tech Guild, Dark, Oracle, Artemis, like Oracle/Artemis, etc. They're working hard to get it fixed. I know we have people who are trying to remedy that issue. But so how do you think, Noah's work as the cards minister plays into that? What do you think he can do with the limited tools in his toolbox that he has, in a way?
Exposure to the other cards departments and organizations, I think is going to give a lot of ideas for how to innovate, because innovation is the way out here. And we're kind of forced to do it. And I don't think he's the kind that has a lot of patience for waiting around and trying to play with the old stuff that isn't working anymore. So if Grundy really is kind of emphasizing the whole let's completely rethink how we do this aspect of things, I think he's a good choice for doing that. So I just have pretty good confidence that he is the right person for the role at this time. And I'm not even going to dwell on the fact that if it weren't him, I have no idea who would do it.
Frankly, because I don't think we have anyone else to do it at this stage.
It's like, well, let's gloss over that fact. I mean, here's the thing. When I think of respected names in the cards community, I'm not talking about just the TNP cards community. I'm talking about NS cards community. You know, I think it's fairly non-controversial to say you think of names like 9003, you think of names like Rakota at one point, you think of names like Praetor at one point, you think of names like Geo, etc. I think Noah fits the bill as far as what you're looking for. That DGS, etc., is another name that comes to mind, and he's been minister before. I think Noah does fit the bill for that. When I think of the core cards people, especially in TNP, but just in the wider community who are recognizable, I think Noah fits the bill on that. So you definitely have somebody who knows about cards and kind of can lend himself better to innovation because he knows what he's dealing with.
Well, you just took the words out of my mouth, which is what I was about to say. I mean, Noah, he's been in the cards community for a long time. He has experience, and he's shown to be quite formidable in his few months after he has played by Hold'em. So I see no reason why he won't be capable of that. And I think it's a solid, stable choice made by Gorondo, and hopefully we'll see the cards ministry flourish even more following the fix of the tech thing.
So in today's broadcast, we've covered, the election results, some interesting factoids about the elections, executive appointments. We've had some questions posed to the audience. If either of you guys see any more questions that you want to answer on air, either you, Ghost, or you, Chipoli, go ahead. But that is the crux of what we really had today. Just general elections recap, cabinet appointments, etc. I think we had a really good discussion as far as where the region is at and how things should look going forward. Is there any closing remarks that either of you two would like to add to this?
We all knew this was going to be a crazy time. So far, I think we're almost to danger of being lulled into a false sense of security to think that maybe it's not as bad as we thought it was going to be. Things haven't kind of played out the way we thought they would, worst case scenario, but we can't let up. We have to keep the foot on the gas because it can get worse in a hurry, I think. And we're all realizing from recent elections that weren't so competitive to having trouble staffing and a lot of key people coming back recently. We have a lot. We have a lot to tackle, and we all kind of have to step up a little bit more. So I'm glad that we're trying to replenish some of those things that we used to have that we lost, and we have to keep doing it. So that's what I'm thinking. But let's get through this crisis of TSP first, and then we can refocus back on all of the what are we gonna do? What are we rebuilding? Because I know Garundu's attention has been severely focused elsewhere, as it should be, but. Have some patience a little bit more. Well, we always appreciate how patient everyone is, but yeah, it's gonna be a bumpy ride. It's gonna be kind of a wild ride. I think we're gonna find our way through it like we always do. So just want to throw some little optimism out there into the world while we have the show. Thanks, Robes.
Yeah, no problem. My final comments are just thank you to all of our audience members who watch this live. And or listen to it rather, and thank you to anyone listening to this in the future when it's uploaded on YouTube. I've gotten messages from a couple of you that you guys enjoyed the show. Fantastic. I'm glad that you enjoyed the show. It's been a while since I've been on NBS. It's been a while since anyone's been on NBS. It's good to know that people are enjoying the show. Obviously, this is the first of the term. Definitely not going to be the last. We'll do this again. Be sure to tune in the next time we announce a show if you've enjoyed this one. make sure to, just generally like the video. Should we do the usual YouTube thing? Like the video and subscribe to the NBS channel. That is what I want you to do. Also, send Cash your kindest regards for allowing us to do this. All right. Well, thank you. Anyone? Yeah. Thank you. And this has been NBS.